They called it a breakdown. I called it the first honest moment in that whole sterile boardroom, the moment my voice trembled while defending the junior analysts from being laid off, while Darren smirked and shook his head. I knew they had already written me off. See? This is why she's not ready, someone whispered, not softly enough. Too emotionally invested, another muttered, scribbling something in a leather notebook that probably cost more than my rent. I wiped the single tear quickly, didn't even blink, but they saw it. Oh, they loved seeing it. The men in tailored suits, the women trained to nod and smile through disrespect. To them, I was a cautionary tale, a black woman with opinions and empathy. How dangerous. I didn't speak again in that meeting. Didn't defend myself when they passed over my proposal for Darren's again. Didn't flinch when the director said, maybe stick to community outreach. It's more your tone. Tone. They always used words like that. Tone, presence, fit. What they meant was, you don't belong here, but we'll keep using your work until we don't need you anymore. So I stayed quiet. That day, that week, that quarter. I nodded when they cut my budget, smiled when they reassigned my best data. Analyst to the new innovation task force. They thought I was fading. What I was really doing was watching, tracking, documenting, and building the thing that would either get me fired or make me undeniable. It was Darren's voice on the quarterly call. The new client segmentation model, he said, with that fake humbleness he wore, like cologne, was a real team effort, but I'd like to thank leadership for trusting my vision. His vision? I stared at my screen at the slide I made, down to the color palette and margin spacing. The numbers I pulled, the insights I'd drafted on a Sunday morning while my niece braided my hair and read out tweets for fun. He hadn't changed a thing. Not one variable. And yet, he was on the call, wearing my work like a suit, acting like the praise was itchy on his skin when you could tell he'd been starving for it. The group chat lit up. Jada, didn't you write that? Maya intern.omg, that's your framework. I remember you explaining it in that metrics MTGE me. Let him have it, because I'd learned something that year. When they see you as too emotional, the worst thing you can do is prove them right. So I didn't clap back. Didn't correct him on the call. Didn't send a side email. Instead, I downloaded the latest reports, opened a new sheet, quietly marked which KPIs improved directly because of my segmentation. I layered in my original analysis, built a private dashboard, one click away from making all of this public, and I started going earlier to work. Before the chatter, before the politics. Just me, the numbers, and a quiet kind of rage. See, I wasn't just keeping receipts anymore. I was building a case, because if they were going to call me too emotional, then I'd show them what it looks like when data cries out for justice. Performance review season came like winter, cold, predictable, and favoring the ones already. Insulated, I sat across from Monica, my direct supervisor, whose office smelled like vanilla lattes and softly dying dreams. She didn't even glance up when I walked in, just motioned toward the chair while tapping away at her keyboard. I want you to know we value your contributions, Brielle, she began, and I already knew what was coming. That sentence always walked in before the real one. She flipped her screen so I could see the words she'd typed. Needs to manage emotional expression in high-pressure meetings. Team feedback indicates presence can sometimes be intense or overly passionate. Would benefit from shadowing Darren for leadership composure. I blinked once. That's what you want to focus on, I asked, my voice still and level. Brielle, you're brilliant. No one's questioning that, Monica said quickly. But leadership isn't just numbers. It's how you make people feel. And sometimes you come off a little, she hesitated, emotional. I was going to say, intense. She leaned in, lowering her voice like she was doing me a favor. This isn't about your work. It's about perception. Darren? People feel calm when he speaks. Reassured, I almost laughed. Calm? The man couldn't explain a pivot table without Googling it. I've outperformed him in every single metric this year, I said quietly. Client retention, efficiency, profit margin. Look at the board. Monica sighed, like the numbers. We're exhausting her. Brielle, you need to think big picture. If you want to grow here, you need to be more palatable. That word. Palatable. As if I were something to be tasted and softened. Not a professional, not a strategist. Just a flavor to adjust. I didn't argue. Didn't defend. I stood up, nodded once, and walked out of that office like a woman already building her next move, because I wasn't trying to be palatable anymore. I was about to be unforgettable. They stopped inviting me to brainstorms after. That review said they were streamlining meetings and only including direct contributors. As if the last 3 client wins hadn't come straight from decks I built in silence. They moved me closer to the copy team, across the office, away from the strategy floor. My name disappeared from shared folders. I was no longer CC'd on. The calls I used to lead. Darren had his own assistant now. Monica called it delegation evolution. I called it exactly what it was. They were slowly erasing me, hoping I'd either fade or leave. But what they didn't know was I was already deep into my second plan. I started coming in at 6:45 a.m., before security even turned the lights on. The janitor, Ernest, would nod at me, say, "They don't know who they're playing with," and hand me a hot coffee he wasn't supposed to give out. "I'm just saying," he mumbled one morning, "you walk like your mama raised a storm." That stuck with me. I spent those quiet hours running reports the execs never looked at. Discrepancies in project budgets, patterns in client churn, efficiency rates by team, time-on-task discrepancies between departments. It wasn't just about showing my value anymore. It was about exposing the cost of ignoring it. Each spreadsheet, each graph, each correlation, it was a brick in the foundation of what I now called the reckoning deck. Nobody knew. Not yet. They thought they'd boxed me out. But I was watching them from the shadows of their own systems, cataloguing every shortcut, every lazy decision, every inflated title riding off someone else's sweat. By the time Darren's new pitch failed and the Q4 crisis hit, the panic in the air was so thick, even Monica started locking her door when she cried. And then, just like clockwork, came the all-hands email from the C-suite. If anyone has actionable insight into recovering our numbers before year-end, we welcome internal solutions for urgent review. I sat back in my chair, clicked open the deck, renamed the file, palatable, reckoning final.pptx, and smiled. The submission window closed at noon. By 11:53 a.m., mine was the only proposal uploaded without a co-author. No fluff, no frilly mission statement, no buzzwords, just numbers, charts, proof, and a quiet preface that read, "The data doesn't care how loud you speak, neither do results." At 2:17 p.m., I got the calendar invite. Emergency strategy session, mandatory attendance, board and dept heads. Time, 4 p.m. Location, top floor conference room. They usually only use that room for investor calls and holiday champagne toasts. I knew because I'd only been in there twice, once to refill Monica's coffee, and once when the AV system glitched and no one knew how to plug in the HDMI. But today, they wanted ideas. And apparently, mine rang loud enough through silence to make it upstairs. When I walked in, the room paused. Monica blinked. Darren shifted in his seat like his chair turned hot. A few board members glanced at each other confused, probably wondering what I was doing there without a handler or manager. To speak on my behalf, I didn't greet anyone, didn't smile. Just walked to the podium, connected my deck and clicked full screen. The title slide glowed across the wall. Retention lip service. Why empathy is more profitable than ego. A few chuckled, that awkward, dismissive kind. They didn't realize yet. I wasn't asking them to agree. I was about to make them see. I walked them through client loss trends after key leadership shifts, showed how every initiative Darren led ended with a 2-point dip in trust metrics, layered in voice clips from support reps, real people begging for direction. And then I pulled the rug. Slide after slide, I proved how the company lost $1.3 million in potential profit because of skipped user testing, misinterpreted analytics, and gut decisions made by the same men who called me too emotional. I let the silence breathe, let the numbers linger. And when the CFO cleared his throat and finally asked, "Why didn't anyone flag this earlier?" I looked directly at Monica, then Darren, then the room. I did. You could have heard a pin drop. No one looked at me, just at each other like they were waiting for someone to blink first. Monica reached for her pen, but it slipped from her fingers. Darren's jaw tightened. One of the board members, a silver-haired man who always spoke in chess metaphors, leaned forward and finally said, "Are these claims independently verified?" I nodded. Clicked the embedded link in the final slide. It opened a real-time dashboard pulling live metrics from our own back-end systems, every number live-fed, every insight traceable. I built the dashboard. It synced with the CRM and the finance team's own reporting, I said calmly. Nothing I showed you came from outside this building. You just never looked at it. There it was again, that flicker, that tiny shift in the room when they realized I wasn't speculating. I was proving. The CTO squinted. "So you're saying the segmentation model Darren pitched wasn't his?" I didn't say anything. Instead, I brought up the time-stamped edits from my private folder, showed the first framework version, my name in the metadata, showed Darren's copy, made 2 weeks later, with a different title and the same logic, line for line. And I still didn't raise my voice. That was the part that got them. Not the proof, not the metrics, but the fact that I wasn't mad anymore, just done. I closed the deck, stepped back. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," I said. "I submitted my proposal because this company is still worth saving. But that doesn't happen if you keep promoting ego and silencing truth." The CEO, silent until now, finally leaned forward. His eyes narrowed, not in anger but in calculation. "What would you need to lead this strategy forward?" he asked slowly. And for the first time in months I let myself smile. The room shifted, not just in posture, but in power. You could feel it, like gravity had turned toward me. The CEO folded his hands like a man who suddenly wanted to listen. "What would you need," he repeated, "to lead this strategy forward?" I let the silence hang for just long enough, let them squirm, wondering if I'd throw out a title or beg for a second chance. But I didn't come for crumbs, I came for clarity. "I want full control of implementation," I said. "No layers, no filters, direct access to department leads, including finance and product." A few murmurs rose across the table. Monica looked like she'd swallowed her tongue. "And," I added, eyes never leaving his, "I want a written correction in the next board memo stating that the previous strategy was developed from my original work, fully attributed." Darren exhaled hard through his nose. "And him?" the CFO asked, glancing Darren's way, voice sharp with curiosity. I turned then, finally looked Darren in the eye. "That's not my decision," I said. "But if you want results, I won't have someone managing my work who doesn't understand it. Simple, not personal, just facts." The CEO exchanged a look with the board's legal rep, then nodded once. "We'll need a revised proposal from you. Your terms in writing, submit it by Monday." "I already have it," I said, pulling a second folder from my bag, titled, "What Happens When You Listen? A Retention Rebuild Proposal." One of the board members smiled, just a little. A shift, a crack in the old wall. I set it on the table, looked around once more. "I don't need a promotion," I said quietly. "I just need the authority to fix what you've been ignoring." And I walked out, no applause, no congratulations, just silence, and the sound of a foundation beginning to shift. 3 months later, the company didn't just survive Q4, it shattered projections. Client churn dropped by 38%. Repeat contracts soared. The new strategy, my strategy, hadn't just stabilized the ship. It turned the tide. The internal dashboards I built became standard across every department. The emotion they once mocked. It became the heartbeat of the new approach. Human first, data-backed, unapologetically precise. Monica was transitioned into a consulting role. Darren took a leave of absence and never came back. No public statements, no fireworks, just quiet exits. Meanwhile, I got a new office. Not a corner one they offered, but I declined. "I'd rather sit where I can hear the real work being done," I told them. Instead, they gave me a new title, VP of Strategic Equity and Analytics, the first role of its kind, the one I wrote into. Existence. But the real win came on a rainy Tuesday, when the CEO pulled me aside after a partner briefing. "You know," he said, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly, "I watched the footage of that boardroom pitch again. We all did. I just wanted to say—" He paused, couldn't quite look me in the eye. "You were right. I didn't need the apology, but it was nice to hear, because the truth is, I didn't win by shouting louder, didn't outpolitic or outposture anyone. I just let the data speak, and when they finally got quiet enough to listen, they heard me, not just the woman who cried once in a meeting, but the one who rewrote the rules with spreadsheets and steel. So when new hires ask me how I got here, I tell them, I stopped trying to be palatable. I started being undeniable, and that somehow made all the difference.